Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, we have the pleasure of chatting with Betty Guadagno, whose near death experience and spiritual awakening have led to an incredible journey of transformation and growth. Her story is inspiring and filled with invaluable insights. Betty, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, girl. I love listening to people introduce me. I'm like, who are they talking about? Is that me?
We're talking about you. You've earned it. You have an amazing experience and amazing life, so you deserve nothing less.
I'm very grateful to be here and to share conscious space with
Thank
somebody
you.
else.
Thank you. We're grateful to have you here. Now, Betty, before we start, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about your life before your NDE?
Yeah, definitely. Trigger warning. My life was very traumatizing before my spiritually transformative experience. I grew up in a really chaotic, dysfunctional home full of poverty and addiction, trauma. And I thought that that was all very normal. I didn't realize until I got around other kids' families that my family was not normal. So yeah, my life before my experience was a lot of a lot of struggle and a lot of really dense experiences. My parents both committed suicide when I was 23 due to their own addiction. They couldn't take it anymore. They couldn't take the cycle of using and poverty and everything that goes along with it. And so when my parents died, my addiction really became my parent. It became my whole personality. And then I started to become a predator. Like I was a traumatized person who was traumatizing other people. So a big part of my story is the fact that I was the abuser. I had gone through a lot of things in my life where I was the victim in the first part of it. And then after my parents' death, I just decided I will never be a victim again. From now on, I'll be the perpetrator. Because I didn't realize that there was any other roles to play. I thought that the only two roles on earth was victim and abuser. And so I decided to become the abuser. And then I had this near-death-like experience that completely transformed my outlook, my life, my personality, everything.
Now, Betty, can you walk us through what happened during your experience and go from there?
Yeah. So my experience happened on March 23rd, 2019, which is the beginning of the season of Aries, which is the symbol of rebirth. So there's definitely some symbolism there. Also fire. And my experience kind of was a rising from the ashes like a phoenix. It was all
Like a
really
face, yeah.
symbolic when it took place.
Mhm.
And I experienced a drug overdose, which, in my life, that was something that had happened before, but I never had a spiritual experience from an overdose. And yeah, I experienced everything that are the mile markers of a near-death experience, except that nobody pronounced me dead. I wasn't in a hospital. This happened in my bathroom, in my home. And I left my body. The first part of my experience was something like a life review. So, like I said, I caused a lot of harm. So the beginning of my experience was really dense feelings, like trauma and abuse and neglect and physical violence, emotional violence. It all started flooding back at me, and I was experiencing it all in 1 second of time. It was like everything was happening all at once. And I experienced my parents' suicide, not only from my perspective as a grieving daughter all over again, but also from their perspective. And so I felt this ocean of anguish and despair. And it was like there were cement blocks around my feet, just drowning me in these feelings. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm dead, I'm dying, and I'm in hell. And this is it. This is the rest of my existence. I'll be buried in this feeling of anguish and despair. And then I started to hear these masculine voices, and they were guiding me into the light. And the way that they were guiding me was they just kept saying, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And so I started to follow their voices. And one of the voices was my father. So it was familiar. And so I trusted that voice. And so I started to travel into the light. And that's when I was downloaded with my mission, my pre-birth plan. And I was shown that I'm a divine spiritual soldier sent to earth on a mission. And I saw all the soldiers, like quote unquote soldiers. We weren't like, there's no sort of war mentality, but there was a bunch of us and there was thousands of us. And we had this commander that was gearing us up for our jump to Earth. And you can call that commander Christ or Krishna, Buddha, higher consciousness, source. It's all the same thing. That's the way that I perceived it, was that it was all the same thing. But this higher entity was so proud of us and so excited for us for what we were going to do, that we were going to Earth to liberate consciousness for the Great Awakening. And then I found my awareness in front of a table of beings, and there was about 4 beings there. And they didn't tell me who they were, but they didn't have to, because I just absolutely had a knowing that they were people in charge, and they were people in charge of my story. They had this big book in front of them. It was the book of my life, and they were thumbing through it, and they were saying, hey, it's good to see you. You're not meant to stay here. You're only here for information. And I can't really explain to you what that space felt like, but it definitely felt like a place that you don't want to leave. So when they were telling me that I wasn't meant to stay, I was totally dismissive. I said, you guys aren't talking to me, because I don't know where I am, but it's way better than where I just was. And so I'm staying here. And then they took me through the details of my pre-birth plan. And there was a man who guided me through this aspect of my awakening. And he was wearing a plaid blazer and a fedora. And he had this big empty grocery cart. And he said, okay, pick your life. And I walked through these grocery store aisles, and lining the walls of the aisles were these gigantic cereal boxes. And every cereal box had a life experience on it. And I start grabbing everything, because I know that I'm coming to Earth for the Great Awakening. So I am taxed with this mission of transmuting a lot of negative experiences that many people on Earth have. So I start grabbing childhood trauma, abuse, addiction, poverty, prostitution. And then there's also things in the cart that I haven't gotten to in my life yet, like overcoming and recovery and spiritual awakening. Those are all mile markers in the story of my life as well. And, you know, when I was going through the grocery store aisles, as I was picking out the experiences, I was also picking the partners. We were picking each other, that we would have these experiences with each other. And the one that sticks out for me very vividly, and I always think is very important to talk about, is the fact that when I picked the life experience of childhood trauma, when I picked the box, a little orb of light came out with the box. And that was the man who would molest me as a small child. It was his soul. And we came into contract with each other, orb to orb. And, you know, my human doesn't have a great explanation as to why. Why would a soul pick an experience like that? Why would a person want to experience that? I saw that in a previous life, I had been his abuser in the same capacity. And so we were balancing the energy for each other in this life. And also, again, because we are in the midst of this great transformation of consciousness, it was something that was put on me to take on for every little girl who doesn't have an opportunity to heal from that experience. I'm taking it on so that I can heal from that experience, and that it sends ripples through the collective, past lives, future lives. Everything's happening simultaneously, all at the exact same moment. And I always think that that one's a really important one to talk about, because that's definitely the first time that I ever felt victimized in my life, when I had awareness of feeling like a victim. And here I was downloaded with this scene, and I saw that I'm not a victim. I chose it. I chose it with this man, and that I'm a divine co-creator of my experience. I'm no victim to circumstance. And there's not some condemning God who's making all of these terrible things happen to me. It was me. I did it. My higher self, my soul chose this. So, you know, I go back in front of the table of beings. I'm like, oh my God, you guys, this is so great to know that, you know, this all happened for a reason. I'm so excited to have this information. I'm still not going back, but I have a lot more information now. I'm going to watch the show from up here. This Great Awakening thing sounds really awesome. It's going to be great. I'll grab some popcorn. We'll all watch it together from here safely up here. Thank you. And they just said, you know, you're not going back as a punishment. You're going back because you're one of our strongest soldiers and we need you there. And, you know, I just felt like they were blowing smoke up my butt. But, you know, I didn't have a choice. They told me that I either had to go back into the body that I came from, which to me, in my awareness, I was like, no way, she's a mess. You know, she's totally traumatized. Her body is full of all sorts of craziness. I can't go back into that body. Don't shove me back in there. And then they said, okay, well, we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into. And, you know, so this opened up my awareness to the idea of reincarnation. Also, that if I don't finish my soul lessons that I signed up for in the grocery cart, I got to come back and finish them. And the baby that I saw, you know, she was beautiful. And I saw who her parents were going to be and everything about her, when she was going to be born. And it was like immediately then. And I thought that if I had to start from zero or go back into the body that I just came from, no matter how broken I perceived she was, I would just go back into this body. And so that's what I did. And as my awareness sifted back into this reality, I just remember them saying so clearly, they said, you know, this is not a punishment. Your life's not going to be nearly as challenging as it was. This is you carrying out the mission. The first part of your life was boot camp. And you're going to have soulmates and kindred spirits and teachers and communities and spiritual awareness. It's going to be so much better. Trust us. And I just looked back out into the everything that is. And I said, I don't trust you guys. And then I found myself smushed back into my body on my bathroom floor.
Well, too bad you don't trust them, but you're going back.
Yeah. And you know what? They were right. My life is, I mean, just profoundly better than it was.
Yeah, they tend to be right.
Yeah.
From what I hear from them, because I haven't experienced anything like that. I mean, I've had certain experiences, but nothing close to a near-death or near-death-like experience. So not that I'm upset. I'm okay. I can talk to people who haven't had it, who have had it. So we're good.
Yeah, I always tell people whenever people say, I wish I had an experience like that. I was like, well, that's like the one thing I haven't got to experience on Earth yet. If you really want to die, I'm sure there's somebody willing to do that. But, you know, I think that people do kind of have this idea that it's some beautiful, great experience. It was chaotic. It was crazy. It was like the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. It wasn't some beautifully profound experience. It took me years. I'm still integrating my experience now.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of coming back, can you describe the process of coming back and finding yourself in your body? How did you feel? Like, oh, you lied to me. I'm back. I didn't want to come back. And like the feelings of kind of like being shrunk back into your body.
Yeah. So I will say this, that I did not know what happened to me. I just thought that I was hallucinating because I had taken a large quantity of drugs before my experience. And so I just thought, damn, I was so high. I will never be that high ever again. And so I just wrote it off as drug-induced psychosis because I was a militant atheist. So I did not believe in anything like this. And I didn't have any awareness. I'd never heard of spiritual awakening before. I had never heard of any of the things that I had experienced. And so my whole experience after coming back into my body was just me trying to shove off the spiritual experience and say, I was just tripping. I was, that was crazy. It was just drugs. And it took me months to realize that my experience was a true one. I will say that once I realized that it was a real experience, I had this very intense, profound longing to go back home. I wasn't trying to, I knew that if I killed myself, I wouldn't go back home because that's a belief system that I have. You don't just go to heaven if you kill yourself, because again, I have to finish my life experience. I have to finish my cart. My cart's not done if I decide that my exit point is now. That's my belief system. And some people you'll hear in spiritual spaces have different belief systems around that, but that's my belief system. So when I, started to have that longing to go back home, I just thought that I had to do certain things to be worthy to go back to the space. So one of the messages that I heard in eternity was, you have to stop using drugs. That's absolutely number one. You have to stop using drugs and keep your vessel clean, because this is your learning vessel. This is how you're going to get through your life. And again, it's not a one size fits all. Some people can use drugs and drink and get through their life. For me, part of my life experience was that I had to do recovery. So I would make it to milestones in recovery and I'd be like, okay, God, I haven't used drugs in 7 days. Are you guys coming to get me now? I'm doing great. I hadn't gone 7 days not using drugs in over 20 years. So I thought that was profound. And, I'd get no response. And then I'd make it to another milestone. Okay, it's been a month. Okay, it's been 6 months. Okay, it's been 2 years. When is somebody coming to get me? Did you guys forget about me? Please come back and get me. And it took me a really long time to realize that it's not about going back to heaven. Heaven is here. Heaven is now. Heaven is in the present moment. And so every second that I have an opportunity to, I can create heaven on earth. And that really is, for me, it's about creating conscious space, connecting with people in a conscious way, and just continually doing the next right thing. Like when I do acts of service, I feel like I'm back in heaven. Like if I hold a door open for a stranger, or I give a homeless person a bottle of water, or, I do an act of service in one of my communities, or even just this conversation right now. This feels like heaven. This is connection. And that's what heaven is. Heaven is connection to all that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was beautiful. Now, coming back from your experience, did you notice any special gifts that you didn't have before? Any special or new abilities?
Yeah, definitely. I was blasted open. I went from zero awareness to infinite awareness. And all of my spiritual gifts were all the way turned on and turned up to 11. And I could not handle it. And I was, I had very intense communication with the other side, especially directly after the awakening. It was like I would hear these voices and I would channel all day long. I would channel the collective. I would channel the beings of light that were talking to me in my experience. And I told them, I said, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with hearing people's thoughts or seeing energy or seeing people's trauma. I need this turned down. And they were more than willing to take away my gifts from me, because I told them that I couldn't handle it. And, sometimes I'm like, why did I do that? That would be so cool to like talk to dead people all day long, or to have this infinite awareness. My spiritual gifts are honed in a different way today. So one of them is that I practice the art of bibliomancy, and I'm very good at it. And that's when you open up a book to a random page and it speaks directly to you. There's a word for it. It's called bibliomancy. So that's one of the ones that I've really honed. And I'm super grateful for that gift because it's much less jarring than hearing a voice. I can open up a book and read a paragraph, and I'm reading it and I'm hearing my own voice while I'm reading it inside my head. So for me, I love that gift. I also have this beautiful spiritual gift of exercising honesty. That's a beautiful spiritual gift that I've been able to do. I don't have any fear of judgment because I already know that I'm not judged because I've already made it to heaven. So I don't have to worry about anybody on earth judging me because it doesn't matter. It's not even real. And then one of the other spiritual gifts that I really enjoy that I have is I'm able to shepherd people to spiritual communities. So I put myself in a lot of different spiritual spaces. And when I get to connect with somebody else, I know that we're here to be part of community. We come here in tribes of souls and we're meant to find each other. So I've been able to really help a lot of people find their way to beautiful spiritual communities.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, and going back to the second one that you mentioned about not feeling judged, I think that speaks to a lot of us because in our earthly experience, it's hard to sometimes we stop ourselves from doing something that's going to make us happy because of what other people may think, what other people might judge us, how they're going to perceive it, and we tend to kind of like overcomplicate things because at the end of the day, did you die because of that? No, it's just another experience. What would you have to say on that?
Yeah, I think that's so right on. And, we play it so small here. And then we come back again because we go back home and we're like, why did I play it so small? I could have been Beyonce, but I decided to be an accountant, and we don't have to play small. And I study A Course in Miracles. It's a spiritual text that it's a channeled message from Jesus. I truly believe that it's the word of God. And in that book, it says that we ask too little of our creator. We're barely in communication. I'll just talk about me. I'm barely in communication, or I feel like God is very willing to help me in certain areas of my life, but not other areas of my life.
Right.
And so there's certain ways that I play it small. But today I have this beautiful ability to be brave, be bold, share truthfully, share honestly, because I know that it gives other people permission to do the same thing. You know, if I can come out here and talk about the fact that I was a liar, manipulator, thief, and I wasn't condemned. I made it to heaven. I have communication with spiritual beings. I'm loved infinitely as a spark of the divine. If somebody like me has access to that, then everybody does. And that includes people that we feel that we judge as really terrible. Like everybody is a spark of the divine. Everybody was a, you know, I like to think of people that everybody was just this little baby once. Everybody was just this little ball of helpless, unconditional love. And, you know, whatever's happened to them in their lives to create them into however they've become in their adult life. You know, like I try to see people as the soul that truly resides inside of them and know that they're just playing a part here. We're all just playing these parts. So if you don't like the way that your script is going right now in the movie of your life, rewrite the script. You have access to do that. You're not a victim to your circumstance. It's just these limiting belief systems that have been instilled in us for all of creation. But the cool thing about having awareness is that you get to rewrite the code of your life.
So, speaking of rewriting and changing the script of your life, what tips can you give the viewers and the listeners for changing their lives to one that's more what they're looking for?
Yeah, all you have to do is die and go to heaven and talk to God. Just kidding.
No biggie.
There's some real tangible ways to do that. You know, even though I had a spiritually transformative experience, that doesn't mean anything, because I have to continually practice integrating new belief systems into my life on a daily basis. So you don't have to die to have that jump start. You can just decide to start. So I really think that spiritual discipline is a huge part in creating a life worth living. So it's about consistency and showing up for yourself. So I do some things to maintain my spiritual fitness. The same way that I go to a gym to maintain my physical fitness, I have to do things for my spiritual fitness. And again, it's not one size fits all, but this is what I do. Number one, I eat clean. I'm a gluten-free, sugar-free vegan. There's no joy left in life, okay? But for me, it works, and it makes my vessel feel very energetic, and it helps me to maintain the frequency that I believe helps me manifest my reality. Another thing is that I drink water only. Again, totally boring, but for me, it works. And I speak affirmation into my water before I drink it. And I drink like almost a gallon of water a day. It's a little excessive. You don't have to like go that deep, but I always speak into my water and I say things like, I love you, you know, or like I surrender to my spiritual path. And I say affirmations. I'm confident, I'm cool, I'm collected, I'm structured. And then I gulp it down and I feel like every molecule of that water just takes over every cell in my body. And so I start to embody those words. I mean, we're made of 90% water. So my little water practice, I feel like, and you see it in science too. There's this great Japanese scientist and he did this whole water research thing where he spoke to the molecules. And if he said something bad to them, they turned into like these ripple waves, like dirty looking. And then if he said something nice to them, they turned into these beautiful snowflake looking molecules. And so I really think that affirmation is a huge part of that. Some other things that I do to maintain a high frequency and to, you know, manifest a life worth living is I get really clear about what it is that I want. I take pen to paper. That's our magic wand. A pen, our hands are connected to our throat chakra. This is our chakra of truth. So when we write things down, especially in I am, I have, I feel statements, we're literally speaking our truth into the universe. And I think that writing it down on a piece of paper is really cool because you can go back and find that piece of paper later and say, oh my God, my manifestation came to fruition. And I wrote it down here and now here it is in my actual reality. So spiritual fitness, you know, like meditating, I don't do something crazy. I don't sit on a pillow for 2 hours a day. Like who has time for that? But I do use my first 5 minutes when I wake up and my last 5 minutes before I go to sleep to set intention, to proclaim my new reality. I also use physical exercise time as a time to meditate because I'm focusing on my breath while I'm exercising my physical body. So those are some of my little tips and tricks, but really get clear on what it is that you want. If you don't like the story that's playing out right now, write down the story that you'd like to see happening in your life.
And now, just to add to what you said, just start small, because I believe that if you are here and then you want to be like all the way over there, you're not gonna be able to make that jump in one single jump. Just create like little stepping stone to get you to where you are. Start slow, start small. Then once you master one, then go into the next one. Because I believe that your goal has to be something that you feel that you can achieve, not something that's way out of even context for you.
Absolutely. A
Mhm.
million baby steps equals a gigantic leap. And, I believe in quantum leaps. People can in just 1 second. I believe in that, but most of us don't, right? And it's
Right.
hard to believe that could happen. So do things that are more attainable. Go towards your belief system. And so if your belief system says, I need 10 steps to get to my goal,
Mhm.
then that's exactly what your reality will be. I do believe in quantum leaps and quantum shifts, but that takes a lot of reprogramming to actually have those experiences in your life. So yeah, a million baby steps equals a gigantic leap. Take those little steps in that direction. Manifestation happens with action.
Now, going back to your experience, Betty, you mentioned that when you were picking choosing your life, picking out, your experiences, the people that were going to be involved with you, in a positive note, not so positive note. How did that change your perspective on destiny, on we create our own life, and the actual experiences that you had with those people?
Yeah, it definitely opened me up to a much more compassionate, forgiving viewpoint because I know that everything is happening in divine right order. And I have to remember that even now, like currently in my life, because it's not as if everybody in my life is a soulmate, kindred spirit. Some people are brutal soul lessons, they're like really challenging personalities that I've signed up for that particular lesson. And I realize now that it has a lot less to do with the person and more to do with the soul lesson. So like, for instance, like let's say you're at work and you have like a challenging coworker. I'm not speaking from my own experience, or maybe I am. So let's say that you have a challenging person that you have to be around regularly. I've noticed that if I don't go into the soul lesson, which is always generally forgiveness and acceptance and tolerance it's some sort of spiritual virtue is looking to be cultivated in a soul lesson. So if I decide, no, God, not this person, I'm skipping class, then the universe just sends me the exact same lesson in a different body. So it'll be a different person will present themselves, but it will be the exact same energy lesson. So today I'm much more willing to just show up for the assignment, show up to class begrudgingly, and just take my final exam. Like, please let me just be done with this lesson. I don't want to do this anymore. But there's still some lessons that I keep telling my guides. I'm like, next class, next semester, maybe next lifetime. Like I'm not doing all of this right now, but I definitely have a much more open awareness to the fact that things are destined. I believe that everything is designed like that. We do have some free will here. I think the pre-birth planning idea is really centered around major plot points in your story. Doesn't mean like that, what time I go to the bathroom every day is mapped out in my soul's plan. Like there's a lot of human experience stuff happening too. But I do think that the soul lessons and the major plot points are already created. So to me, it takes away a lot of pressure. I don't have to worry about, like, I'm just going to use some collective examples, like finding a husband. My husband's going to find his way to me. I don't need to go out searching for it because I create more resistance when I do that. Or, like finding my purpose. Like purpose is not rigid. It's not something that's, completely in some sort of box. I know that it's already designed, and that every day that I relax into the spiritual flow, I'm fulfilling my spiritual purpose. And, like just anything like that, any of those examples that are big, major things in people's lives and their human experiences, it's all working out. You don't have to be too concerned with it.
That's something important for all of us to remember, because from my own experience, and I know that many of us could identify with the same comment, but sometimes we want something to happen so badly that we forget that if it's meant to happen, it is going to happen. It could happen today, it could happen 20 years, it could happen when you're 80. But if it's meant to happen in this life, it's going to happen when it needs to happen, not a day before, not a second before, not a minute later.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's the thing, is we're a very impatient species. You know, we're very used to instant gratification, and so we want what we want when we want it. And you know, and where does spirituality come into play with that? Where does faith come into play with that? For me, I realized that one of my major goals in this lifetime is to really exercise those spiritual muscles of faith and acceptance and tolerance and patience and unconditional love, these beautiful spiritual virtues that we all have access to. And so when things don't go my way, which they don't often, they don't go the way that I think that they should go. But I have this unwavering faith today that my higher self, my spirit guides, my angels, source, everything that is divine, they've got me. I'm not here to have a bad human experience. I'm here to learn and grow and evolve. There's no such thing as good and bad in eternity. It's just experience. And so I just need to be here for it.
Experience and duality. That's 100% true. So, Betty, speaking of faith, you mentioned that you were an atheist before your experience. So after your experience meeting with divine beings and having basically experienced divine love, how did that change your view and perception on religion and spiritualism?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. My beliefs changed 180 degrees, and I went through a process coming into my idea of what faith was, because, okay, once I realized that I did have a spiritual experience, now I needed to cultivate my own faith. And I thought that I had to fit into somebody else's box in order to do that. So I didn't know anything about spirituality. And so the only thing I knew about spirituality was the Bible. And I went to a pharmacy and I stole a Bible because I didn't have any money. I was like a drug addict, crackhead. And all I knew was that I needed a Bible because I knew that there was something spiritual happened to me. And I knew that I needed to figure out what it was. And I thought the Bible was going to be the thing to show me what that was. So I got a Bible, started opening it up to random pages, and the pages were speaking directly to me. And then I tried to go to some churches, and I went to an evangelical church. I thought that I was supposed to go out on a mission, a Christian mission, and preach the word of Jesus and God. And as I went there, they were really enthusiastic for Jesus. You know, they were really enthusiastic for God. And I was excited to be enthusiastic about God too. But it wasn't making any sense. Like, the things that they were saying and the way that they were acting were two different things. And so it didn't feel like it aligned to me. Then I went to a Baptist church and I thought, okay, I have to get rebaptized. I have to devote my life to Christ. Like, this is what I have to do. And again, they were also really enthusiastic for God, but the things that they were doing and the things that they were saying did not line up for what I thought God was. And then I studied the Quran, and I thought that I was going to convert to Islam because I thought that I had to fit into somebody else's box. And so the more spiritual texts that I read, the more that I realized that not one religion is right. And I got to cherry pick all the things that I really liked out of all the different faiths and design my own spirituality around it. And that was a beautiful gift for me. And it only happened through exercising the spiritual virtue of open-mindedness. Because after the experience, I thought one thing about God. And then the more that I integrated and the more that I educated myself and the more knowledge that I came upon, I realized that it's not linear. It's not in a box. It's not rigid. It can continue to ebb and flow and grow and contract and expand. And so that was one of the most beautiful parts of this process for me. And I'm still designing my conception of a higher power. I'm always going to be. Things are always changing. We live in this constantly changing universe. So some of the things that I believed in when I first came into awareness are not the same things that I believe today. And I anticipate that will continue to be the same thing for the rest of my experience here.
I was raised Catholic, And although that is the main religion, at least in my country, I'm originally Dominican. Um, Something didn't feel right with me. And again, I appreciate, the Catholicism and the upbringing and everything that I learned, but something was not clicking. And when I moved to the States and I was on my own, I started looking for different places to kind of like feel my heart and find my truth. And that's very important to kind of like keep an open mind, for everyone listening and watching the video too, that there is not one religion that's right, that's correct, that has all the truth. All the religions in the world have a level of truth to them, at least that's me speaking from my experience. And at the end of the day, all the religions, everyone is reaching for the same God.
I think a big part of it too is that people crave community. And I think that people are drawn to specific religions because they want communion with other people. They want to be in a state of community. And, in the Western world where we live, this is not something that's taught in our culture to be part of community. It's like hyper independent here. It's very strange. In other cultures and other parts of the world, they have community with each other. But I do think that, religion, I think it started as an opportunity for people to commune together and focus on God. And maybe over time, it kind of got warped into something else.
Now, Betty, going back to your experience, you mentioned that you heard the voice of your father calling you out of that hellish experience that you were having at that time. So, how did that change your perception of your parents in this case, from the parents that you experienced to the one that was calling you out of that situation?
My God, what a good question. That is so great. So, my father is my number one spirit guide. He's always with me over my left shoulder. And man, he is a way better dad in the non-physical than he ever was on earth. And he's aware of that. Like, we have this conversation often. My mother as well, Again, these are the personality profiles. These are the stories that we play inside of our human bodies. So once their human body was gone, they were able to be their infinite light that they actually are. And, I have a very layered perception of what happens when you commit suicide. I believe that my father communicates to me not only from heaven, because we're all actually still in heaven. We just think that we're here playing this role here, but also he fractured a timeline, him and my mother both, that, because their mission wasn't finished yet, they had this opportunity to fracture off into another reality where they woke up in a hospital bed and it was a suicide attempt and not a death. And, that's like goes into the multiverse and like all of these different ideas of reality. That's like a whole nother podcast, I'm sure.
Yep.
But I will say that it helped me a lot with my resentment. I really resented my parents for a long time for abandoning me here. And today I don't have those feelings of resentment towards what happened for them, especially now that I understand my own addiction so much more. Addiction is almost like a separate entity, and it is so cloaked on you. I mean, at least in my family, like our addictions they kill us, So, for me to be able to step out and to recover today when my parents never had an opportunity to, I really feel like I do that not only for myself and for the collective in general, but also from my family line. And so I do definitely have a much better relationship with my parents today. They're, much better dead than alive, for sure.
So, what can you tell people or listeners in this case, that have been, that grew up in a similar situation and their parents are no longer around, but they're still holding that anger, that pain, that resentment toward, like, in their heart? What advice could you give them?
Oh, wow. That's such a great question too. So I think something that really helped me in this process, again, just because I had some spiritual experience or I perceive that I'm communicating with my father does not mean that all sort of went away in one swoop. This has taken years of inner work for me to get through some of these aspects of my life. So I'm going to recommend a book until I write my own, and then I'll recommend my own book. But one of the books that I did was a book called Heal Your Inner Wounds, and the author's name is Abby Wynn. I highly recommend this book for anybody who's dealt with any sort of trauma in their life. It took me through aspects of my of shadow work. And it took me through my inner baby, my inner child, my inner teenager, my inner young adult, all of the facets of myself that interacted with my parents. And so it was an opportunity for me to talk to those other versions of myself and find out what they needed, because this adult version of me had a spiritual experience, talks to her father on a regular basis. So she's not as wounded as, say, 5-year-old me, who was getting physically abused by my father and doesn't feel as forgiving or accepting as adult me. So I have to be in communication with that version of me to figure out what she needs. Another thing that I did was I wrote letters to them, and as part of an amends process and a letting go process as well. And I wrote down all my feelings, like this is where I feel wronged. This is where I feel hurt. This is where I feel victimized. These are the good things that you did for me. These are the bad things that I did to you. These are the good things I feel I did for you. And I really just got it all out of me. And on the top of the paper, I wrote, I released this from my experience. And after I was done writing these letters to them, I crumpled them up. I buried them in the earth. You can set them on fire if it's like a controlled situation. You can, kind of into pieces, throw them in the garbage, like whatever you feel will be a releasing experience for you. Cut those energetic cords. Confucius has a quote, very famous: resentment is like you drinking poison, waiting for the other person to die. Holding on to anger and resentment doesn't do anything but make you physically sick. I think that it's the cause of cancer and physical illness. When we hang on to these emotions, they manifest physically inside of our bodies. And, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I still have some resentments that I refuse to let go of too. But I know that I'm in a state of continually working on these today.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have a magic wand to make everything disappear. It's a process we have to go through and learn from it and find what works for you. Going back to what you mentioned about writing a letter, I've never been in any similar situation. But, things from the past do tend to come up and bubble up over time. So I remember one day I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this and I'm going to release these emotions because it's just not helping me. So something that, just to add to what you said, I remember putting meditation music, lighting a candle, getting my crystals, writing a letter, and that letter turned out to be an 8-page letter. I put everything there and then went outside, burned the letter, and threw the ashes into the ground. And I was like, I released this to the universe to be transmuted into positive energy. So that is what works for me. And, just do what feels right for you at that time.
Love that. Yes, I love it. And I think that it's so important for us to share about what works for us, because I took what other people said worked for them and I tried all of it. And then I got to decide, well, wait, which of these actually works for me? And some do and some don't. So I love everything that you just said.
So now that we are in the topic of helping each other spiritually speaking, can you explain the idea of being a spiritual soldier and the significance in your mission?
Yes. So I think maybe soldier is like not great language because it seems like it's something like warlike, but I do truly believe that I am a soul sent on a mission. And that mission is to liberate consciousness. I don't know if consciousness wants to be liberated or not, but it's something that gives me a sense of direction. And so this is a story that I tell myself, and it really helps me. And if you like it, please take it. And if you don't, leave it behind. But I think that for me, the idea that I came here to complete something, I came here to achieve something, keeps me on a path of moving forward. And because I believe that I'm doing it for the whole collective and not just myself, it really keeps me focused. Because if I thought that it was just for me, I don't always think too highly of myself. So I might not keep going. But if I think that I'm healing for a little girl who maybe her dad killed himself and she's never going to have an opportunity to process that grief, and it's going to make her life go down a path that she never could have imagined for herself. Maybe if I stay on my own healing journey, I can help that little girl in some way by having tools, or maybe my energy will redirect hers, or who knows, like it's infinite. So I do think that the story of being a spiritual soldier, for me, it really helps me. And, I feel very connected to my commander. I feel very connected to source because I know that source sent me here for this. And again, the whole world is a collection of stories. That's all that the world is just a collection of stories and tales and algorithms and archetypes. And so step into the one that works for you. And this is the one that works for me.
And speaking of that, so you mentioned about different synchronicities, meeting the person, like seeing the man in the subway and then finding that lady in your, was it a bus ride?
Yes.
So what role does synchronicity play in your life now, and how do you recognize it?
Wow. Yeah. My life is flooded with synchronicities because that is the affirmation that I say to myself every morning, that I will experience divine signs and synchronicities today. And synchronicities can be anything, like there are these miracles, these coincidences that we think maybe are random, but they're definitely not random. I believe that things are designed for us, and synchronicities get me back into a space of wonderment and awe. And if it's okay, I'll share a quick story about a cool synchronicity that I had.
Please do.
Yeah, and anybody can try this exercise. I was reading Gabrielle Bernstein's book, The Universe Has Your Back. And in the book, she says that you can ask the universe a question and request a sign as your answer. So if the sign manifests within 24 hours, it's for your highest good. And I always waste all my spiritual questions about men. Always. I'm like, is this guy my soulmate? Is he my twin flame? Tell me, show me. So I asked the question, is this guy for my highest good? And the first sign that pops into my head is a squirrel. And this was like the dead of winter in New York City, snow all over the ground. I was kicking myself. Why would you pick a squirrel? Why would you think of a squirrel? You're never going to see a squirrel. It's not going to be for your highest good. Just forget about the whole exercise and go meet this guy. So I'm walking into this guy's house and I'm really nervous about it. And I'm watching the snow crunch beneath my feet. And then all of a sudden, while I'm still staring at my feet, a squirrel runs right over my feet and goes up this tree. And I'm just staring at it and I'm thinking, this is insane. How could this be? There's no squirrels anywhere. How is this squirrel right in front of me? And I'm listening to a song about soulmates in my headphones. And then all of a sudden the guy emerges from his house. And it was like this whole little scene played out like a movie. It was like the soundtrack, the spiritual sign, the leading man across the way. And I was like, oh my God, my highest good has come to fruition. Amazing. And the next day I'm walking down the street and I'm still in this whole fog of like, oh my God, God exists. God is supporting me. God is real. And there was a random book on the sidewalk. And I knew that the book was there for me. I had this really strong intuition say, go pick up that book. I pick up the book. I open it up to a random page. The title of the chapter that I opened it up to was The Squirrel. These big, huge words right in my face. I exploded. My brain melted out of my ear. I fell into a puddle on the ground. What? How is this possible? Random book, random page, random street, opened it up. The squirrel. Okay, now I know my highest good, right? So now my obsession about this guy being my soulmate is like full in force fire going on inside my body. Next day, I'm walking down the street, again, still totally encapsulated by the divinity of these signs and synchronicities manifesting. And on the bottom of a lamppost that I walk past, there's a gigantic sticker of a squirrel. So here's the moral of this story, right? I thought that my sign would not manifest because I had this very limited human view on how it had to manifest. I thought that it had to be a physical squirrel and that there would be no squirrels because it was winter. That didn't matter because the divine had something in store for me. Now I asked if this was for my highest good. Now I don't understand the difference between spiritual highest good and human highest good. So in my human perception, highest good means this guy's going to be my boyfriend. We're going to be spiritual soulmates. We're going to go around manifesting our reality. But it wasn't that, okay? Because this guy rejected me hardcore. And so I'm crying out to the divine, but why did you manifest all the signs? And all I keep hearing is, It's a soul lesson in rejection. Have some acceptance. And I refuse to accept this. So I'm calling up the guy and I'm like, but what about all the squirrels? There were so many squirrels. And he's like, girl, you're psycho. I don't know what you're talking about with squirrels. Like, what are you saying? And so that was my lesson. My lesson was that I had to have acceptance, and that God's rejection, or this guy's rejection, was actually God's protection, and that something better was waiting for me right around the corner. But it was also a really intense lesson knowing that I am supported, even through things that my human thinks are really gross experiences, like being rejected by some guy that you like. My creator has my back 100%, and it all worked out for the highest good in the end. But that's my really cool story about synchronicity and signs.
So, in other words, if we get rejected, it's a lesson.
Oh,
Relax, let it go.
Yeah.
If it's meant to be, it'll come back, like I said before.
Rejection is God's protection. Always, always, always. You don't have to ever force a puzzle piece to fit into the design. Like,
Sure.
if it's not meant to be at that time, it's just not meant to be. And you can just move on, brush yourself off, and keep going. It's saying that, but it can be if you want it to be.
Now, I wanted to ask you, so you've had a very, very, very challenging life. And then at one point in time when you had your experience, like everything turned. And I think I heard you in a different interview saying that you stayed in that hospital bed with that lady that was helping you with the recovery. You stayed with her for 17 months. So coming out of that place, how were you able to integrate technology, access to the internet, going back to your previous environment, and still remain centered and not fall back into old patterns?
Yeah, I think that took a lot of integration, and I kind of slowly made my way back into reality. So I went into a long-term rehab for a year and a half with the lady from the bus. That's part of the story. And yeah, she really helped me understand different aspects of myself as a mentor, but also being disconnected from reality is what I needed, because I was a ruthless drug addict. Every emotion that I had, I thought that I had to cope with drugs, whether it was joy and elation or depression and sadness. It didn't matter what the emotion or situation was. Drugs was the answer. Oh, my shoe's untied. Let me do some heroin. Oh, I got an A on a test. Let me smoke some meth. Like, it didn't matter what it was. So I really needed to deconstruct and reprogram someplace safe to do that. And that's what I accomplished inside that long-term rehab. But I didn't have access to the internet or a cell phone for a year and a half. Slowly they let me, like I would go to the library once a week. I'd have access to the internet there. If I went out for an appointment, they'd let me have my phone for an hour or whatever. So, like, that really helped me a lot with dismantling my technology addiction too, because that's something that I think a lot of us suffer from as well, is the addiction to technology. But it was cool reading books and learning things that way. Much different than just watching a YouTube video.
Absolutely. And for people that are going through similar challenges, they're struggling with addiction and they're trying to get clean, what advice would you give to those people?
I would definitely say reach out to me for support. My info will be in the liner notes of this episode. I'm on all social media. My handle is Buddha Betty. It's a play on words. Also, find your way to a rehab if you have access to that. Like the rehab community in America, it's like a lot easier to access than it is in other parts of the world. But also get yourself to a 12-step fellowship. I'm a member of Narcotics Anonymous. That program has given me an entirely different life. But if you need direct connection, please reach out to me so that I can shepherd you to a meeting or another fellow in recovery or somebody who has a similar story to you, or whatever it is that you feel like you need. There is an infinite amount of help out there. The key to recovery is surrender. I had to let go of everything that I thought I knew and design a new life.
Perfect. And for people that may have had either a spiritual experience, a near-death experience, that are trying to kind of like integrate that into them and kind of like process and get the lessons from it, but they're not finding support within their circle, what advice would you give them?
So I work part-time for the International Association for Near-Death Studies. The acronym is IANDS. And I would definitely suggest looking into that organization. It's IANDS.org. And you can find sharing groups online. Community. For me, community was key, to find other people who had similar experiences to me that could give me language and integration tools. So I definitely suggest highly getting involved in some sort of spiritual community, finding your people.
Beautiful. And I'll put the link also in the show notes. For the people that are not watching us on YouTube, if people wanted to get in touch with you, are you open to that?
Yes, absolutely. Buddha Betty, reach out.
Perfect. Awesome. Now, do you have anything going on right now? Any projects that you're currently working on that you would like for us to know about?
Yeah, I'm writing a book. I hope everybody will enjoy it once it's finished. And I also work as a transformation coach. So if you're somebody who's looking for personal coaching to get you through some sort of experience in your life, or you're looking to hone on your spiritual gifts, or you're looking to let go of certain addictions or release certain trauma from your life, that's definitely something that I do. And I love what I get to do for a living now.
Okay. And do you have a website for that where people can go and schedule a session with you?
Yeah, I'll give you my my calendar link that you can put in the note.
And before we leave, Betty, do you have any last positive messages for the audience?
My positive message is, your thoughts truly do shape your reality. Change your thoughts, change your life. If you don't know how to do that, reach out for help, find a motivational video. There's so much that you can do, but your thoughts really do shape your reality.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for ending us on that note. I greatly appreciate you being on the show today, Betty. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. So grateful to connect with you. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.